This is annulment proof, the only place on YouTube where marriage gets defined. There's a bit of a celebrity priest out there, Father Chris Alar. A lot of people know him. Anyway, he said some reckless, wild stuff about annulment, which is in La La Land, and also divorce. So I saw his video and I'm like, let's kind of react to that and talk about it. And then I got a bunch of divorce nerd boring stuff at the end and notes, and we're going to go through that. But let's see what he has to say, and I want to do my best, in real time to counter it. Okay, here, let's see if we can put him on the screen like this and see what Father Chris Alar tells us about basically modernist divorce and how they schmooze the whole thing.
On EWTN. There are many hot button moral issues today, such as abortion, gay marriage, and transgenderism. They are fiercely debated because no matter who we are, somewhere deep inside our hearts, we know they are wrong, even if we don't want to acknowledge it.
That's right.
However,
natural law.
Other issues, such as divorce and contraception, are almost completely forgotten and are not topics of debate.
That's because in the 60s, or I shouldn't say that. Once you got NFP going, contraception becomes a non-issue because it's family planning. It's one way or another. It's just family planning. Therefore, divorce becomes a non-issue as well, because now we are no longer defining the purpose of marriage. So we cannot define it. So divorce goes out the window. Contraception goes out the window as far as a hot topic. This is why we also don't have sermons about divorce, because there's nothing to say, because there's no contract if it's just a love-based arrangement. Here, let's keep going.
Why? Because they are now completely accepted in today's society.
Like NFP, yep.
But what is church teaching about divorce and annulment?
Hopefully we don't get a commercial here.
Jesus confirms God's word in Genesis that marriage is to be between one man and one woman and is to be for life. He teaches that true discipleship is not to include concessions because of weakness.
True discipleship?
Therefore, divorce is excluded and remarriage may become adultery.
If it's public,
this is a hard teaching. The Greek word apoluo, translated divorce, means the relinquishment of a legal right.
You have a right.
The Pharisees tried to trick Jesus by saying that Moses allowed a bill of divorce. But this was allowed only because it provided some legal protection for a woman who was abandoned.
The bill of divorce was allowed because Moses allowed it, because the Jews were going to off their wife to get a new model. That's why. That's the only reason Moses allowed divorce, was because that's one way to get a new spouse. You kill your current one. And they were going to do it. They were so messed up back then. That's why.
It made the husband relinquish his right to her, so now another man could marry and protect her. So Jesus is not really saying divorce is okay. He is saying it was an unfortunate concession because of man's hardness of heart. Jesus said, "What God has joined, let no man separate." Based on this verse and the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we can surmise that divorce can be sinful in and of itself.
It is sinful. It's divine law. What God has joined, let not man separate. Zero exceptions. We got to define, we're going to talk about this later too. There's divorce and there's put away. And in all the New American Bible and all these other Bible verses, except the Douay Rheims, they say divorce and divorce. It's divorce and put away. Two different things. That's where part of the confusion is. But this is all after Vatican II in order to keep the NFP/annulment going. They had to redefine everything, which is why we're here talking about this.
However, is divorce always a sin? And is it ever allowed by the church?
It's always a sin, and it's
Many
never
say
allowed.
it is not divorce, but rather remarriage without an annulment that is the sin.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. but not
Maybe doesn't work.
necessarily. Catechism 2384 states divorce is a grave offense against the natural law.
And then there's 3 dots right there. You see the 3 dots? Okay. Because after that, it says it claims to break the contract to live together. Those you can't say contract anymore because there is no contract. It's just a huge pile of love. So divorce. Hey, why am I zooming in? What's wrong with this? Is funny. Move back. I got this new camera, dude. Here, let me see if. Wait, let me see if. This is so weird. Back up, camera. Look. All right, let me push pause and see if I can. Okay, we're rocking. Here we go. Let's see what else we got going on here.
And does injury to the covenant of salvation.
Yes, it does injury to the covenant of salvation. It does injury to your own salvation, but it's the image of Christ in the church. So there's 2 things it does wrong. It just like abortion rips the baby in half, but it also it's a violation of a lot of things, not just the baby's body. Okay, divorce breaks the family's body and the symbolism of Christ in his church. So 2 things, but they don't talk about natural law here because a love covenant isn't natural. It's not nature. Sorry. Here we go.
Then paragraph 2385 says divorce is immoral because it introduces disorder into the family and into society.
That's one reason. Yeah.
This disorder brings grave harm to the deserted spouse and to the children traumatized by the separation.
That's right. That's right.
And starting a new union with someone after you've been married to someone else adds to the gravity of the rupture.
I'm not in 4th grade.
Permanent adultery. However, divorce may not be sinful when one spouse may be innocent. For instance,
divorce may not. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to keep
they tried to save the marriage, but were abandoned. Catechism 2386 says,
so if they were abandoned, the moving party is the guilty party, the one walking out the door, the abandoner. And every time anybody who leaves is guilty until proven innocent. Doesn't matter how innocent you feel. The person who is left sitting on the bench is always innocent until proven guilty. Even if the quote abandoner runs around saying they're the guilty spouse, no. It's the moving party that's guilty in every case until proven innocent in a separation court, which used to exist in every diocese in this country until the Beatles. They went away because there's no more nature, there's no more contract. It's all just a big pile of love.
It can happen that one of the spouses is the innocent victim of a divorce.
Okay, this is kind of like catechism newspeak. It can happen that one of the spouses is an innocent victim of a civil divorce. It always happens. I got to get this straight.
Decreed by civil law. This spouse, therefore, has not contravened the moral law.
Yeah, so every time somebody takes you to divorce court, you are the innocent spouse. It can happen. There is no other way to do it. One spouse is an innocent victim of a divorce decreed by the civil law. This spouse, therefore, has not contravened the other. In other words, if somebody takes you to divorce court, they are the guilty party 100% of the time until proven otherwise. And since there's no more separation courts, there's no way to prove that. So this is why divorce is... This is one of the reasons why divorce is a sin in every case in the USA today. Because, what does it say? It says right here. Well, I don't want to. Oh, shoot. I messed it up. Hang on a second. Let me go back. Yeah. This spouse, therefore, has not contravened the moral law. The one who's sitting there, the non-moving party, the girl on the bench, she has not contravened the moral law because she didn't do anything even if she was the worst person in the world, she didn't do anything publicly, which is divorce court.
This spouse, therefore, has not contravened the moral law. There is considerable difference between a spouse who sincerely tried to be faithful to the sacrament of marriage and is unjustly abandoned, and one who, through his own grave fault, destroys a canonically valid marriage.
I think that's pretty straightforward. Let's just check it out real quick. There's a considerable difference. There's obviously someone who is tried to keep the marriage keep the conjugal life going, and is unjustly abandoned. Yeah, whatever. Through his own grave fault, destroys a canonically varied. Never mind. Sorry. Let's go.
So both parties may be guilty of the sin of divorce.
Time out. Both parties may be guilty of the sin of divorce. No. It's like saying, look, if somebody goes and shoots somebody, they're not both guilty of murder. Only the person who shot the gun is guilty. You can't have two guilty spouses in a divorce, only one. Where is this guy thinking this? I don't know. What is he even? He gets this because he thinks it takes two to tango. Therefore, a divorce can be both people's fault. Wrong. Whoever files is at fault publicly.
Or one party may not be guilty. That is why Catechism 2383 says that if...
Okay, so one party may not be guilty, and that's why this says this? No. Sorry.
Civil divorce remains the only possible way of ensuring certain legal rights, the care of children, or the protection of inheritance. It can be
all right, so look, it's real simple. I've said this a bunch of times. Everyone knows. Civil divorce remains the only possible way. It's never the only possible way in the United States in 2024. Never. There's legal separation in all 50 states. Some of it's straight up legal separation, and a few that don't have it, they have the equivalent, like Texas has the equivalent of legal separation. You never need to do divorce. Sorry, here we go. It's always a moral offense because you're ripping apart nature, the contract to live together, which is why you didn't put that in the video in the beginning, but we're going to get to that.
Tolerated and does not constitute a moral offense. That is why some divorced people may receive Holy Communion, but not remarried.
Wait, that is why some divorced people can receive Holy Communion. So he is saying that some divorced people can't receive Holy Communion. It's 50% of the spouses can and 50% can't. The ones who did not file can receive communion. That's how it works. And the ones who are publicly guilty cannot. Everyone who files for divorce is publicly guilty until proven innocent in the separation court, which hasn't existed since the 60s because we now have a love-based marriage, which is illegal, which is why we're talking about this. So it's not a private matter because divorce is manifest sin. So it's public. Not a matter of how I feel. It's a me and God thing. It's like, I'm going to steal your car and follow my conscience, and that's between me and God. So you can't call the cops on me or anything like that. I'm going to go to communion. I stole your car. I feel it in my conscience that it was okay. That's what this guy is saying.
People without an annulment. An annulment is not a Catholic divorce. It is simply the church declaring that a sacrament.
In theory, it's not, but in practice, it's a Catholic divorce because all that happens is when things hit the rocks, you get your annulment. That's what and we're going to listen to what he says here.
Mental marriage never existed in the first place. Remember, a number of elements must be present at the time of marriage for the sacrament of marriage to occur.
For validity.
The first is canonical form.
Yeah. Okay.
That means a Catholic, baptized Catholic, must be married in a Catholic church.
Yep. Like
obviously, this applies to Catholics only. The marriage of non-Catholics may be valid, even if they did not marry in a church, because while not sacramental, it is still a natural marriage.
That's right. P.S. Catholics cannot enter a natural marriage. Catholics cannot. If you're baptized, you have to get married in the church. There's no such thing as a natural marriage among Catholics. It cannot exist.
Next, the couple must also freely and knowingly choose to enter marriage. It must have free consent and not be a shotgun wedding, for example. Then the couple must understand what marriage is. Some are young and immature and don't understand what it entails.
Uh-huh.
They must know it is a lifelong.
Oh, young and immature and don't understand what it entails. You have to be 14 for girls, 16 for boys. All you need to know is where babies come from and how that happens. That's kind of about as mature as you need to be. Hold on, I think I cut him off here.
Relationship, and they
Oh, hold on.
understand what it entails. They must know it is a lifelong relationship.
No, they don't have to know it's a lifelong relationship. They just have to know that it's till death, the contract to make babies. That's what it is. See, here's someone calling me on the phone. Never mind. Anyway, so yeah, it's not a relationship. It's not a partnership. It's a contract for rights till death.
And they must both be open to having children. Again, if any of these elements are missing at the time of marriage, it is not a valid sacramental marriage in the eyes of the church. Next, the couple must intend fidelity and the mutual good of one another.
Fidelity, all that means, obviously, is exclusivity. But now people like Scott Hahn and all the other marriage redefiners want to add to fidelity they try to put good of the spouses and cram it into fidelity. Fidelity just means no cheating on your spouse. That's all it means. It's exclusivity.
Many people marry but have no intention of being marriage in the eyes of the church.
Hold it. We got to go back.
Next, the couple must intend fidelity
and the mutual good of another. That's the rub right there. There's 3 marriage bona, 3 from St. Augustine, procreation, exclusivity, permanence. Now they're adding mutual good. This is the heresy of the spirit of Vatican II, because they never said the good of the spouses is secondary. They didn't just say primary or secondary. So now we have mutual good. And he's saying this is now essential. Okay. You cannot define mutual good. Good does not come from nature. Therefore, it cannot be part of marriage, sacramental or natural, because it's all the same thing as far as the essence goes. A baptized person and a non-baptized person look the same thing naturally. Same with a natural marriage and a sacramental marriage.
And the mutual good of one another.
No. He goes by pretty fast on this, and he's kind of slippery or whatever, but that's why I want to untangle this. You do not need mutual good of another in order to consent validly, because it cannot, like I said, you can't define it. And if you can't define it, you can't consent to it.
Many people marry but have no intention of being faithful to their spouse.
Okay, almost nobody. This is why the amount of annulments increased to 21,000% in the 60s. We started like 4 annulments in the U.S., I think in 1900. Then it went to about 300 once Margaret Sanger and contraception started getting going. People started thinking more about, quote, like love versus the purpose of marriage. And then anyway, everyone knows it's permanent.
And lastly, they must have the physical and psychological ability to follow through with the intentions of marriage.
Psychological ability to do what? Make a baby. Doesn't take much, my man. That's the problem right there. But if marriage is love, that means it's got to be a total gift of self, which is impossible. And it has to be this total love, whatnot, which turns into just whatever anybody wants. I have a right to a feeling, and the wife has a right to a feeling. Therefore, we have to have these feelings, and we have to get this love that we want. And if you don't give it to me, you're too much of a psycho. That's why you can get an annulment anytime you want. Here, hang on. Sorry, I talked too much.
So things such as impotence are an impediment to sacramental marriage.
Impotence is an impediment, as physical impotence, because the primary purpose, the essential purpose, is procreation. That's why. So these annulment explainers, they go on and on with all the obvious stuff, and they kind of gloss over the elephant in the living room, which is you have to have an undefined amount of good, and that is the heresy right there, because procreation alone is primary per the Bible.
So, when all of these factors are brought together, a sacramental, indissoluble union exists. It
Yeah.
cannot be dissolved for any reason, even if the civil government, through divorce, says it can be. An annulment states that one or more of these elements were not present at the time of marriage, and thus a true sacramental marriage never occurred.
Yeah. True sacramental marriage. You can truly, whatever. It's either valid or it's not. Has nothing to do with how truly sacramental it was. This is just kind of like newspeak for it's got to make me feel really great, or we have to have this pie in this tower of love somewhere, to be truly sacramental, like John Paul II. And no, it's just about validity.
Remember, however, that the spouses believed that their marriage was valid, or they wouldn't have entered into it.
The spouses believe that they're married. That's right. That's what everyone does. Okay. Just remember what he said here, because everyone does believe it's valid, or they wouldn't enter into it. But then later he says, go ahead and split from your spouse if you think it's invalid. Ugh. Hang on.
So the children are not illegitimate.
Yes. The children are not illegitimate because you entered a putative marriage, which means it looked normal. Therefore, and by the way, there's a lot of people who want to get the healing annulment because they feel guilty from their divorce. They figure if there was no marriage, there was no divorce. No, just like the kids remain legitimate after annulment, your divorce sin remains legitimate after annulment. You cannot take your divorce with you to heaven, even after the annulment. Hang on a sec. All right, here we go. Let's see.
A church decree of invalidity does not imply that a legal marriage never existed, but only
A church. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Legal. Sorry. Hang on.
legal marriage never existed. So the children are not illegitimate. A church decree of invalidity does not imply that a legal marriage
The
never
civil.
existed,
Yeah,
but only that it did not have the character of a sacrament, meaning again
wasn't
that the
valid.
children are not illegitimate.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Now,
sorry.
what do you do if your marriage becomes unbearable?
For better or for worse. That's what they used to say. But now when it becomes unbearable, okay, for what? Let's see. Sorry.
It is very abusive, for example.
Look at this guy. Ah, I'm going to kill you. Oh, what? She didn't make the spaghetti like you wanted. Come on, man. It's always like this. Sorry, too stereotypical.
Canon law says that it is best to first get church permission for a separation.
Canon law does not say it's best to first get permission for a separation. No, that's not what canon law says. It says you must, because God said, let no man put asunder. So it's not best to follow that. You have to. It's a salvation issue. You go to hell if you don't get permission from your local ordinary, because it's divine law. What God has joined, let not man put asunder. So the bishop is not man, he's the church. Okay. He's he who hears you hears me, kind of thing. So that's how that works. Let's listen. Let's keep going.
Which can help maintain the marriage bond.
The marriage bond is something that exists independent of you or me or anybody else, and it doesn't need any maintenance. Kind of like your sacrament of baptism doesn't need maintenance. The bond exists. You're one flesh with your spouse. It's not an emotional relationship thing. Let's go to the marriage counselor to work on our bond. No. There's so many weasel words in here, and that's how they get this new NFP love-based divorce annulment stuff through. They just redefine the words. Okay, so anyway, the bond is the sacrament. It exists independent of how anyone feels or who's talking to who and who lives where.
The hope is that the spouse will change after the separation.
Yes. If the hope is the spouse will change. So if there's one spouse who is not operating correctly, then this is all governed by ecclesiastical authority. Okay. So that the guilty spouse, the one who's a big old problem, they have to identify what that problem is, put it on paper, and say, are you willing to change? Are you willing to do this?
And reconciliation might be possible.
Yeah. So if you don't reconcile, guess what happens? You go to hell. That's the thing. The bishop will say, this is what they used to say in the separation courts. It's not about an emotional feeling or how you want to get this done. It's you signed up for marriage. You can't back out now for a variety of reasons, nature and it's God's rights. I mean, come on. So, you either need to perform the solution of whatever the problem is, or you lose the sacraments. That was the separation court, okay? That always existed since Trent, and they got rid of it when they started making love based on what is good. So now all you hear here, look at these people right here. They're just interested. This is love-based marriage in action right there. Look at that hug. There's their separation court right there. So it's all about the feelings, and whoever feelings rule. Okay. Therefore, no, we cannot have objectivity and we cannot have definition if it impacts someone's feelings. Have you ever heard of a safe space? Get away from me with your truth, or I might blow a fuse. You better tell me what I want to hear, or I'm out of here.
So these situations don't always need to end in divorce. The divorce primarily happens when, after the separation and other consequences, the abuser remains unwilling to change.
That's not when a divorce happens. That's when the sacraments get cut off because they're not changing. They're not remedying themselves. The bishop says no more sacraments, no more Catholic burial, no nothing. You obviously don't want to. You want to put asunder what God has joined. So we're not going to pretend and play patty cake with you, which is exactly what everyone does right now today. That's why marriage is in the tank. And Father Chris Alar is continuing with the problem because he's giving us all this crazy redefinition.
This can be an indication that there was an impediment to having a sacramental valid marriage in the first place. This would allow
Okay, he said a mouthful. Right, I got to back this up. He says it pretty quick.
the abuser remains unwilling to change. This can be an indication that there was an impediment to having a sacramental valid marriage in the first place.
Boom. So he is moving right through this. He's saying, look, you got a spouse who's a problem. Therefore, he just said that is a reason for an annulment. Isn't that what he just said? Yeah, I think he did. The reason the marriage wasn't valid in the first place. So if you can make a baby, it's valid. You have capacity. You have discretion. All you need to do, you need to know where they come from and how they're made. That's all you need to be able to do. But if marriage is good, then you have to have charity on my terms. You give me charity on my terms. And if you don't give me that, then there's no, quote, marriage, because this isn't a real sacramental marriage the way I want to feel and all this junk. So he's basically, they're greasing the skids.
This would allow the spouse who had to leave the grounds for an annulment.
He just said it right there. So this would allow, this is why it's a Catholic divorce. This is exactly why. Things hit the rocks. It's nice to talk to the bishop, but you don't have to. So you could just kind of like go to counseling and, they're not changing. So therefore it's not valid. And I have an excuse for a divorce now and an annulment.
In canon law number 1153, it states, a spouse who occasions grave danger of soul or body to the other or to the children.
I got to push pause real quick. Okay, this is separation. This is where he messes up later in the video, by the way. This is all from Matthew 19:9. This is the porneia exception, basically. When somebody is you cannot put away your spouse, separate, except for fornication, except for infidelity. And Trent has increased that to say, if it becomes unduly difficult, whatever. So this is why we have this is what the separation stuff comes from. It's all in the Bible. He's going to get rid of all of that. He says it means something else. At any rate, let's go.
Or otherwise makes the common life unduly difficult, provides the other spouse with a reason to leave, either by decree of the bishop.
Yep. So there it is. Decree of the bishop. They have a reason to leave. And then, hang on.
Or if there is danger in delay, even on his or her own authority.
Very simple. And this is the weasel phrase that everyone uses. It's super simple. Listen, you can separate, but not on your own authority, because in the Bible, it's divine law, what God has joined, let not man put asunder. Everyone knows that something's wrong with divorce, but they don't know what it is. Okay, so you can, on your own authority, you have to get a decree of the bishop. That's what it says right there. If you can't get the decree right away because there's something going on with the spouses that makes it dangerous to sleep there, or it's just too crazy, you can get out if there's danger in taking too long to get the decree, but you have to do due process. And the next Canon 1152 says you have 6 months to do this. So otherwise, if you don't need to ask the bishop, all this goes out the window, which is why nobody pays any attention to it anymore. If you can just do everything on your own authority, why do I have to get a decree? It's like coming over the southern border. You have to be a citizen, or you have to get permission first. Unless you feel you're in danger, then you don't. Now you're instant. No, you have got to do due process.
The canon goes on to say that once such a danger has passed, though, common life should be restored.
Once the danger has passed, common life must be restored. No, he messed that up. Once the danger has passed, you have to get that separation decree. He totally goofed that up. I hope he wants. I've tried to talk to this priest, by the way. He won't talk to me much. He blocks me. I tried to get him on YouTube. No, won't go there. He can't hold a candle to this stuff because he's wrong.
Say that once such a danger has passed, though.
When the danger is past, you've fled the house, you go to your sister's couch or whatever. Now you have to pursue that. You have to pursue that separation decree. So I got to text me. Okay, you got to pursue that separation decree.
Common life should be restored.
By the way, it also says, and I'll talk about this in a minute, common life must be restored after the problem has been solved. Okay. This is because what God has joined, let not man put asunder. It doesn't, what God has joined, let man, it'd be a good idea if man didn't put it asunder. That's what he's saying. He's just redefining it.
Basically, the canon law of the Catholic Church says that it is best to get permission for separation.
Do I need to say anything? It's best to get permission from who? From the local ordinary. You have to get it. Have to. Because what God has joined, let not man put asunder. There is no, it's a good idea. No, it's black and white.
As we said, it doesn't really mention divorce. The Catechism says if this doesn't work, then divorce may be needed.
If this, no, that's not what it says.
Like to protect legal rights. But how does this reconcile with the Gospel of Matthew, who says that you can divorce for unchastity?
You can do. Okay, hang on. He's going to blow through this really fast, so we're going to push pause a little bit.
Well, unchastity here does not mean infidelity.
That's exactly what it means. It's exactly what it means. All Catholics until the Beatles, until the 60s, always said it. You cannot put away your spouse except for unchastity /porneia /fornication, which means They're cheating on you. That's when you can do it. That's the exception clause. Everybody always said that until Vatican II. And now they have to change it because we have to justify the fact that marriage has no rights, no contract, and you can walk out when it's not happening and you're not acting all huggy, okay? Therefore, they have to change the meaning of Matthew 19:9 and the exception clause.
It means here an invalid marriage.
This also doesn't make any sense just from a practical standpoint. He's saying that you can put away your spouse, you can separate if you think the marriage is invalid. But you can, since all marriages are considered valid until proven otherwise, you can't ever separate. He's like making no sense at all. You can separate from your spouse if you think the marriage is invalid, but you have no right to judge that, so you can never separate until there's an annulment. But that means you can never do a divorce unless there's until after the annulment. You have to have an annulment first. Therefore, you cannot separate before an annulment. And if there's an annulment, you're never married in the first place.
Not adultery. So those persons should split anyway.
He just said a mouthful. He said those persons should split anyway. What does split mean? What is the legal definition of split? I guess he's saying move apart. So he just said this is why he's enabling no fault divorce. He just said if you think your marriage isn't valid, split. But he earlier said in the video, everyone gets married thinking their marriage is valid. So it's obvious it's Catholic divorce now, because when you don't like the way it's feeling, listen what he said. It must not be valid because I'm not getting the good that I have a right to. Listen what he just said.
Here, an invalid marriage, not adultery. So those persons should split anyway because the marriage was invalid in the first place.
You have no way to judge that. It's like saying, I'm walking down the street and I see somebody else's car. I think I'm going to take that car because it's never their car in the first place. You have to prove it first before you take the car. This is why this exception clause for an invalid marriage makes zero sense logically. I don't care. You can talk all about what you think porneia means. It doesn't make any difference. You cannot separate for an invalid marriage because you can't prove invalidity, because you can't judge it. Only the bishop. Nor can you judge your separation. Only the bishop.
And finally, civil divorce affects the legality of marriage.
Oh, this is big too.
Yes, but not the sacramental reality.
Civil divorce affects the legality, but not the sacrament. Marriage is the contract itself. The sacrament is the legal. The sacrament and the legal go together, kind of like your body and your soul, your arms and your legs. They don't separate, okay? So this is why he's saying divorce is just a civil matter only. That's like saying abortion is a civil matter only. It's not affecting the personhood of the baby. It's just, oh, golly. I'm going to get to this in a minute because I got it all written down so I don't get go back and forth with the papers, with the screen. He's effectively saying we can separate the contract from the sacrament. That is a heresy. You cannot do that. He's an enemy of marriage, and I'm going to prove it to you.
Of marriage. What we have to remember is that for the baptized, marriage is indissoluble, and nobody.
It's indissoluble for everybody, baptized or not baptized. Unless you get permission from the Pope or whatever, it's, natural marriage is indissoluble.
Can cancel that bond, not even the church. If two validly baptized people marry without impediments, it is sacramental and thus binding. This kind of marriage cannot receive a divorce because Jesus said, let no man separate what God has joined.
That was a great mouthful right there. This kind of marriage can never receive a divorce because God, but he just totally undermined and contradicted his whole thing. This kind of marriage cannot get a divorce. Like what he just said, it's crazy. This is why these guys make no sense, but they can't debate because they're 2 + 2 = 5. Look what he just said.
Binding. This kind of marriage cannot receive a divorce because Jesus said, "Let no man separate what God has joined."
Okay, so if you have a valid marriage, you cannot get a divorce and you cannot separate it. Right. But he just said when things hit the rocks, it's probably not valid, so go for it. Okay. So, in other words, you can get out of any marriage you want, and none of this till death do us part is relevant at all. There's no more permanence. And what God has joined, let man separate anytime he wants, because uh you you can just wait till, like, you can sabotage it, you can make things go bad, and then you can say, look, there's not enough good in the room, and I have a right to good because the spirit of Vatican II says so. So where's my divorce and annulment? We've tried counseling, and no, marriage is dead when you have guys like Father Chris Alar, who is bending over backwards, massaging these terms to make it all happen. And the reason why is because NFP. Once you have procreation secondary, love becomes primary, and that has no legal definition. So the purpose of marriage doesn't exist. You can't define it. So there's nothing to join or put asunder. It's just it's
An annulment is simply given to show that there was not a sacramental marriage in the first place. Again, may be legal, so children are not illegitimate.
yeah.
An annulment simply shows that something needed was lacking at the time of the
They
marriage.
always say this stuff. Something needed was lacking. Okay. Did you have something to make a baby with? Yeah, that's it. That's all you frickin' needed. You don't need all this other stuff. But they're saying this. Oh, sorry.
Or there was an impediment that meant one or both of the persons should never have entered into the marriage bond to begin with.
I know none of that happens. You don't marry your sister by accident. And all this is why there was 4 annulments in the USA at the turn of this century, 20th century. 4. Because everyone knew what it was and people kind of figured it out. Okay. But once you include love in the legal definition, the number of annulments per year went to 80,000, a massive increase. In other words, it's a get out of marriage free card, annulment on demand. Divorce, no sin, because you can say, I'm the innocent victim. I'm innocent. Who are you to judge? There's nothing to judge because you don't know what's going on. And he just said, you don't need it's a good idea to get permission. Well, then fine. It's a good idea to pay your taxes, but you don't have to. It's a good idea to obey the speed limit, but you don't have to. See, there's no speed limit. There's no taxes, no law.
With. Keep in mind, however, that not all hope is lost. A marriage outside of the church
Okay.
can later get a special blessing called convalidation, as long as neither
I
person
think
was
that's
married
it. I think
before.
that's
And
fair.
while not many people know about this,
All
it
right.
can put you back into a state of grace.
Yeah. Okay.
Since hardness of heart and human weakness continues,
Okay.
even
That's about it. So let's go to the here. We got to go to this other thing real quick. I'm gonna go like this, and we're gonna go through. Sorry. We'll share this. Haven't said. Let's go. Here's my show notes. We'll blow through these. This is so I didn't go back and forth. Okay. What time are we at? 40. Ooh, this is getting long. Here we go. Okay, this is the part he didn't say. Divorce is a grave offense against natural law. It claims to break the contract to which the spouses freely consented to live with each other till death. That's why it affects nature, okay? Because there's a contract to live together. A contract is legal. It's in the church. This is what you can't put asunder, the contract. Can 1153, we already went through that. Yes. Okay. In all cases, when the reason for separation ceases as determined by the bishop, I don't get to say what the reason is. She doesn't get to say what the reason is. The bishop does. The common life is to be restored. That means must. Is to means must. So you have to get back together unless the bishop says you don't have to, because one spouse is being, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. There's a fancy word. Anyway, he's not going along with the program, or she's not going along. So they get the sacraments taken away. Okay. So you have to move back together unless the bishop says you don't have to. Canon 1154. This is all about the separation. When a separation of spouses takes place, provision is always and in good to be made for the due maintenance and upbringing of the children. The state provision to be made for the due maintenance and upbringing of the children. The state has no business. The state has no authority to determine what the upbringing of the children should be, because they will go ahead and say, if one spouse wants to do chemical castration and change the sex of the kid, then go for it. Separations are by the bishop. This is where it proves it right there. No state separation. The bishop has to do the parenting plan. Separation court. Then you can take it to the state for enforcement, but the bishop makes the separation, or the bishop makes the parenting plan. And this is all per Matthew 19:9. Let no man put asunder except for fornication. So if there's grave reason to separate, the bishop handles the details. The innocent spouse, so Canon 1155, shows that there is always an innocent spouse. If you have two innocent spouses, there's no reason for separation. There's no reason for divorce. If you have two innocent spouses, therefore there's always a guilty spouse. And publicly, that is the non-moving party. So the innocent spouse, a non-moving party, may readmit the other spouse to the conjugal life, in which case you need his right to separation. So you have no right to separation unless there's grave cause, and you have to take that to the local ordinary. Otherwise, what God has joined, let man put asunder. When you feel like it in your heart and your mom thinks it's a good idea, or your next door neighbor, let man put asunder. That's what's going on here. Okay. Here, Canon 12 of Trent. So Trent has, basically, before marriage was public, you could go to every town and get married. So Trent said, no, we got to get this all made more public. And I think they were doing that like the 12th century and stuff. So if this, for many causes, you can separate, but all marriage causes are by the decree of ecclesiastical judges or anathema. And this also says it's anathema if you say that you can't separate. I can show you Canon 12 also. This is 13, but Canon 12 says it's anathema if the bishop doesn't give you permission. Okay, here. This is what I'm accusing Father Alar of. He is severing the matrimonial contract from the sacrament. So this is our canon, the late 1800s encyclical from Leo the 13th. Okay. You cannot give the contract to the state. Here he says, hand over the contract to the power and will of the rulers of the state. You cannot do the divorce with the state, and then you can't do the, what do you call it? You give the sacrament to the church. No. They go together, because marriage is the contract itself. That's why, okay, you can't separate the head from the body. You can't separate the soul from the body. Marriage is the contract itself. You can't let the state sever it from the sacrament, and they're all valid until proven otherwise. And this is exactly what Father Alar has done. Casti Connubii number 4. So this is in 1930, that encyclical. People are saying, well, this is way back. Pope Leo the 13th didn't understand in the 1800s what we have going on now. Okay, so 1930, Casti Connubii comes. We have decided to speak, therefore, blah, 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 Christian marriage. Okay. Leo the 13th, if you're thinking that Arcanum is obsolete, think again. Far from being obsolete, it remains in full force to this present day and to 2024. Nothing has changed, because you can't change what God has joined. Let not man put asunder. Okay, now, Father Chris Alar is an enemy of marriage, because he is saying you can take your contract to the state on your own authority. These enemies of marriage, this is Casti Connubii 78. Then it goes into 79. Add that the marriage contract is to be freed from any indissoluble bond. He just said marriage is indissoluble, but you can take that and free it and take it to the state, and that separation and divorce are not only to be tolerated, but sanctioned by law. Okay, so this is exactly what he's doing. He's tolerating separation and divorce. Follows Rodwell. Matrimony should only be enumerated amongst the secular civil institutions. In other words, you're taking matrimony and you are separating it. You're giving the sacrament to the church and the contract to the state. No, you're not. You can't do that. So, oh boy, this is getting long. Sorry about this. Matthew 19:9. This is the part, the rub here. Okay, they're saying when you look at all the new Bibles, they talk about you need a. Let's just see what he says. Look, therefore that let two are one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined, let not no man put asunder. They said to him, why did Moses give a bill of divorce and to put away? Divorce and put away are two different things. Hardness of your heart. Whoever shall put away his wife, not divorce his wife, shall put away. So this is why all the new translations are goofed up, and they've done that to try to get all the annulment stuff through and all the NFP. If you put away your wife, except it be for fornication. So you need that. If your wife cheats or your spouse cheats on you, that is the only time you can put away. You can separate, but you can never divorce. Moses used to let you divorce because you were going to fricking kill your wife if he didn't. But now with grace, God took that away. You need grace. You can go kill your wife and get a new spouse. It ain't going to work for you. That excuse is gone, baby. Okay. Now here is the commentary from the Douay Rheims, which is correct, and it contradicts everybody, including Father Chris Alar. Except it be in the case of fornication. This is of adultery. In other words, your spouse cheats on you, you can separate. That's what the church has always taught until the Beatles. Father Chris Alar contradicts that right there. It's adultery. The wife may be put away, but even the husband cannot marry as long. Okay, that's what the exception clause is to put away. What else we got? Cornelius Lapide, he's the man. Everyone knows that. Okay. Putting away your wife is contrary to nature and contrary to the ordinance of God. So those are two reasons why you can't put away. It's not just because it does violence to the covenant of salvation. And this is what 2384 says in the Catechism. Same thing. He's right. Moses suffered. Okay, this is why he did it. Moses said you could put away your wives lest you should not kill them. That's why. Okay. Whosoever shall put away his wife unless for fornication and marries another commits adultery. He commits adultery, I say, both by putting away his wife as well as by marrying another. In other words, putting away your spouse is adultery by itself. Just separating is adultery. He is twice an adulterer. Christ gives the answer to both questions put to him, for the Pharisees asked two. In other words, is putting away adultery and is remarriage adultery? They both are. Okay, because that's the nature. Adultery means to go against marriage. I think that's got to be a wrap. I think that's the end of it. So I know this got long, sorry, but I want you to go ahead and make sure you give me a hard time and you argue me to death if you want. If you think I said something wrong, you can. I'll always like subscribers and likes too, But anyway, I think I got another video to make a little later. Thanks for watching.